What's up, y'all? It's Xavier with Crash Out Motorsports, and behind me is a table full of car parts. And so in this video, I'm going to talk about the crash out that I had with the Cobra and sort of what my plans are for the rebuild with the IRS, with the brake system, as well as the differential. It's going to be a good time. Let's go ahead and let's get into it. Before we get down to business, let's go get a lip pillow. There we go. Need these here. So, to kind of explain this crash out and how it originated, I went to get new tires for the Cobra and get an alignment done, and the tech told me he couldn't do an alignment. I say, why? And he showed me on the rear driver's side tire, when you put a wrench onto one of the lug nuts, the tire flexed really badly. So he told me to look at the bushings, check my cross-axis joints, and as I pulled the IRS so I could start to get the old bushings out, I realized the majority of the bushings on the IRS were totally shot. So at that point, saw the differential as well, and I had leaking coming from the pinion seal that connected to the drive shaft. So I had looked at my brake rotors, cooked, pads, gone, diff was leaking, bushings all over the IRS were bad, so I went on ahead and just did a full refresh for all three systems. And sort of the breakdown of what that looks like for the IRS side, I went full kitted out with the full tilt boogie racing setup. And then for the brakes, I went with the S&S Engineering brake upgrade kit, which allows you to take the Brembo brakes that came OEM off of the Cadillac ATSs and put those up front, and then new rotors and pads for the rear. And then lastly, I went on ahead and took care of the differential as well with an Eaton True Track. I have a new diff cover, that's the Ford Racing Stronger reinforced one. I'm putting 355 gears back into it because personally I'm not a fan of the 410s. It makes first and second gear completely unusable, so we're going to put the 355s back so I can have better first and second gears. And then just took care of some other small tidbits that I'll cover later on in the video. But the idea was for me to touch all of these parts one good time so that I didn't have to think about it again for the foreseeable future, which, relative term whenever you're pushing these cars, as hard as the average Cobra owner does. But I wanted her to be able to shoot straight. I wanted her not to have wheel hop. I wanted better braking because she does go fast quite consistently. And I wanted a better gearing setup that was more tuned for street driving. So we'll go ahead and we'll kind of break down all the specific purchases that I had made and sort of how they all fit together into this overarching project that is refreshing, in essence, the entire drive line of the Terminator. So these are all the components that I purchased to address the braking system on the Terminator. So the first thing I'm going to talk about are these Cadillac ATS 4-piston Brembos. So these are a huge upgrade over the 2-piston Brembos that came stock on the Terminator. But in order to run these, there's a kit that's made by a company called S&S Engineering that you have to purchase. I didn't pull it out because there's not much to the kit. It's just some rotor spacers, there's some mounting hardware, there's some bolts and bobs in order to fit these calipers onto the Terminator. Then I ran 13-inch Cobra rotors up front. I have 11 and some change inch rear rotors. And the other part that I had to purchase in order to run the Cadillac ATSs were the StopTech seal braided brake lines. These are compatible with those calipers, so I bought these. And then to address the rear, I also got myself some Maximum Motorsports steel braided brake lines as well. Now to kind of tie all of this together, I went with some Power Stop carbon ceramic brake pads for both the front and the rear. I do expect to get an increase in stopping power from these pads, and I don't think they're the dustiest setup that I could have purchased. So all of these components are going to tie together the Terminator's stopping power really well and give me a huge improvement over the current stock setup that I'm running. Now, one thing of note through my perusing of forums such as svtperformance.com is some people will say if you want to run the Cadillac ATS calipers up front that you should install bigger rear calipers. I believe they come off of like a late 90s Taurus, just because they were slightly bigger and they help to balance the brake bias of the car. But I personally think that doing the upgrades that I'm doing now and the refreshing of the rear as well at the same time with better pads will give me what I'm trying to achieve with just increasing my stopping power overall. And if it is something that is that noticeable, then I can go on ahead and address that in the future. But for now, I think this is more than enough to keep me occupied. And when it's all said and done, I expect a significant improvement in the braking performance with this setup. So these components right here are the ones that I'm most excited about because the differential rebuild is probably the most drastic change on the car. So what we have here first, this is an Eaton TrueTrack differential carrier. It's the second Eaton TrueTrack that I purchased in the last year. The first one that I bought, I put in a 2013 Mustang GT. And I really love the feel of the TrueTrack on that car. It made the car feel more solid on launches. And it's a big upgrade over the carbon clutch style differentials that came OEM in the Terminators. So that's the first order of business. Second is I went with 355 gears, which, fun fact, were the OEM gears that came in the Terminators. When I bought the car, it had 410s in it, and I'd never owned a car with 410s prior to, and I'm not a real big fan of them because it just makes my first and second gear completely unusable, and the car puts down over 5, so I feel like 355 is kind of the ideal gear setup. I think Ford really got that right out of the factory with putting 355s in them to get that good balance of speed and acceleration once you start throwing basic bolt-on modifications on the car. Next, we have the Ford Racing reinforced differential cover. Won't call it a common issue, but Cobras are known to blow out their stock diff covers. So these are meant to be a lot stronger, and I think they're far more aesthetically pleasing as well. There's some nuances with installing that differential cover that I'll talk about in a second, but it also comes with a quick fill and a quick drain that the OEM style diff covers don't have, so it'll make servicing the differential a lot easier. Up front, I'm doing just OEM style wheel hub replacements, and then in the rears, we have full tilt Boogie Racing rear wheel hubs with, I want to say these are 3-inch studs. They're pretty long boys. If they're not 3 inches, they're somewhere in between 2.5 and 3. Because fun fact, one other issue that I ran into with the car when I bought it was the studs were cut and they were too short. So to address that, I figured these were a suitable upgrade, and they look gorgeous. I love the way that they look. Super shiny, super aesthetic. I'm going to clean them up a bit, but these things look really well put together, and the cost of them definitely reflects that. And then lastly, we have the lube locker differential gasket. I have 3 different gaskets for the differential cover, but this one just seemed to be the best one to run with the aftermarket one. I don't want to deal with diff leaks, as that's something that I've had to deal with Mustangs consistently. So that was what I'm choosing to run with the diff cover to ensure that once we have the entire differential pumpkin rebuilt, that I can keep it nice and sealed. Now, one small particular detail about building the diff with the aftermarket Ford Racing differential cover is people complain about the bolts and the hardware that come with it, the threads not being long enough to really bite down into the casing, which contributes to leakage of the differential. So one thing that people recommend purchasing whenever you buy that differential cover are these bolts right here. So what these bolts are, yep, there we go. Yep, they're 5/16 by 18 by 1 3/4. So they're slightly longer bolts, and they actually drive all the way, almost bottom out into the differential pumpkin itself to make sure that the differential is actually being, or the cover rather, is being held down into the pumpkin sufficiently and to prevent leakage from coming from the diff after you've reinstalled. So small details like that matter to me because I'm doing all this work right now and I would hate to have to take it all back apart because the process of dealing with the differential at all in Terminator is super difficult. It's not like a solid rear axle where it's all right there. You take the cover off, change the gasket, slap her back on. You have to drop the IRS, or you have to drop the pumpkin from the IRS in order to get to it, which I don't want to do again once I get her back into the car. So measure twice, cut once, do the research, make sure that you're getting all the small nuances of the upgrades in one go so that you don't have to do something twice. That's kind of the name of my game. So that's the differential build from start to finish. And then next thing that we're going to talk about is the IRS system and the full tilt boogie racing setup that I'm going to be running on the car. So these are all the components that I'm going to be swapping out on the IRS system, and it's all full tilt boogie racing that I'm going to be running. Just to kind of cover the first bits, these are all the bushings. I love the way that they're packaged. They're all labeled super clear. And then I have the bump steer kit, which these are all adjustable as well to replace OEM bump steer kits. And then this is an aluminum differential, like lower bushing mount as well to replace a stock one. It's solid all the way through. The other one is kind of a rectangle that's hollow. This is one block of metal, which I think is pretty cool. I also have these rear adjustable sway bar end links. It says S550, but this is the kit that they call for with the Terminator, so I imagine that there's not much difference in them. And then we also have the cross axis joints that I also bought from Full Tilt Boogie Racing. So yeah, that bag is blank. That's pretty nifty. But this encompasses the entirety of the IRS system right here. So when it's all said and done, every bushing will be solid, full control over the camber and the toe of the vehicle as well. And it also came with some extra cool parts, like just stuff to do the job. We've got all these Zerk fittings. They give you a drill bit because you are going to have to drill in because you are able to lubricate all of the bushings. So it gives you that. And then also, I bought the Full Tilt Boogie Racing bushing removal toolkit to make my life a lot easier. I tried to use a kit that I got from AutoZone, and that was not fun, nor was it easy. So just purchasing this kit is going to expedite me going through the process of removing bushings because that, not a fun task at all. And then the rest of it is just extra screws. So they come with some new hardware. I also bought the short stubby bolts that connect the IRS to the frame of the car. So it was all inclusive, every single bushing, the majority of the bolts, and all the other components and linkage to the IRS system is going to be completely covered by this kit. So there's one more thing that I want to talk about that I bought for the car that I'm very excited to install because handling is super important to me, and I understand that I bought a Mustang at the end of the day. And while the IRS Mustangs handle better than the solid rear axle GTs of the same year, they still have a lot of room for improvement, particularly the coupes. So this next modification that I'm about to show you guys, I think will kind of tie it all together. And I actually saw it on a marketplace car a little while ago, and that's where I got the idea to install this. So I'm going to show you guys this next part now. because I think when this is installed, it's really going to help tie all of the modifications together so the car feels rigid, it feels solid, and it's going to be about as close as I can get to putting a Terminator on railroad tracks. So this right here is the Stifler's FIT system. FIT standing for Fully Integrated Technology System. And what this is this is a step above just traditional subframe connectors. So these two bars right here are the subframe connectors, and then these two bars connect with these, I want to call them pretty much ladder-like reinforcements in order to completely stiffen the entire underbody of the car. Now, welding is going to be required with this, but when this is all said and done, I'm going to have the entirety of the bottom of the car all tied together, which will significantly reduce roll. And whether I'm launching the car or I'm taking turns at higher speeds, it'll help make the car feel far more composed than it currently does, because the coupe Cobras didn't come with subframe connectors. That was a convertible thing. So I think that it's going to be a drastic improvement over just doing all the work that I'm doing with the IRS and not addressing sort of the stiffness of the body itself. So now that we've kind of covered everything, I'll go ahead and I'll throw this out there, just for those that are curious. The price of all of this in these modern times was actually pretty steep. So all in all, everything that I showed you was about $6,000 worth of parts, which is insane. It doesn't look like $6,000 worth of parts to me at all, but in these modern times, being a car enthusiast is not a cheap thing to do. Never has been, but more so today now than ever, in my personal opinion. But I've had this car for about 5 months at this point. I've had a lot of fun with it. It's been on and off jack stands, because the first thing that I did was I rebuilt the supercharger. I kind of went over all the things that I initially did with the car in the first video on the channel. And now that I ran into the issues that I did with the suspension and the differential, I think that touching all of these systems at once made sense. And even though it was very expensive for me to get all the parts together, I'm doing all the labor myself with buddies, funded by pizza and beers in essence. And so installing it is going to be an adventure within itself, but I'm really looking forward to getting all this on, and I do think that it's going to be worth the money when it's all said and done. And I'm going to have a completely different Terminator than the one that I had bought, and if nothing else, I'm never going to have to touch anything again. Knock on wood. I understand that this video wasn't necessarily the most exciting, a lot of sitting and talking, a lot of explaining, but as I go through the build, I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a vlog style as we do the work, just to kind of show you guys what that looks like. And then of course I'll also touch on a review after it's all installed and I have it balanced out. I'll talk about sort of how the car feels in kind of a POV driving style video. So with all that said, thank you guys for taking the time to kind of listen to me blabber on about the Terminator build and just sort of the crash out that I'm experiencing with the car right now. If you guys have any comments in terms of insight or feedback, gripes, disagreements, drop them below. Drop a like, subscribe so you guys can follow the build. I definitely feel like I am in over my head on this, and it is terrifying. But every great build kind of has that ingredient in the whole recipe. So I'm looking forward to seeing it all done and looking forward to sharing it with you guys. So this is Xavier with Crash Out Motorsports. Take it easy, and I hope to catch you guys on the flip side.